What exactly is a Jeff Ulbrich defensive scheme look like?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. So if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. and I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that go strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this illustrious podcast your first listen each and every day. And to become an everydayer, all you have to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, we will be revisiting the Falcons' hiring of Jeff Ulbrich. We've now had a week to let it marinate. We'll give our thoughts on that. And of course, with me to give those thoughts is Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta. We'll talk a little bit about potential scheme changes for the Falcons defense. And maybe we'll touch upon a little bit of the Senior Bowl, since Jarvis and I are both headed down to Mobile, Alabama next week to watch some of these draft prospects that may or may not be future Falcons. But Jarvis, let's talk about the Jeff Ulbrich hire. I have not really talked about it since Monday on this podcast because personally, I don't think there's a whole lot to talk about. The Falcons hired the person that everybody thought they were going to hire, that nobody really wanted the Falcons to hire, and yet they proceeded to do it. But, Jarvis, since we haven't picked your brain on it specifically here on Locked On Falcons, they've heard your thoughts on it elsewhere on Locked On Sports Atlanta. But what are your thoughts now that you've had basically 5 days to let this Jeff Ulbrich hire marinate?
Now that I've let it marinate, I'm just at the point now where they need better players. I mean, figure out this salary cap, figure out this Kirk Cousins situation, and bring some talent in here and get younger. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? Because, I'll say this, and people, and it's not anything that's going to be earth shattering. It's all about the Jimmys and Joes, man. I get it. Scheme, offensive play caller, because everybody seemed to focus on that. When it comes to the D, man, you got to have players, man. I don't care how good your defensive scheme is. You got to have players. So I feel like with players, Jeff Ulbrich has kind of proved that, hey, man, whether it's Robert Saleh's a solid scheme or Raheem Moore's scheme, give me some players to work with. I can make it work. And as far as just from a scheme standpoint, in those New York Jets scheme, he was one of the guys that played a lot more man coverage. And what did we see? The Falcons have success this year. Once they start playing a little bit more man coverage, playing a little bit tighter coverage, they start seeing 24. The guy who they just paid a poop ton of money started to come out, start shining a little bit. So as much as scheme matters, right? Scheme fit matters for the players that they have on this roster and the players that they're going to bring in. The most important thing is you're able to do things with your scheme. There might not necessarily be something that you like to do or what you prefer to do when you have better players. I can blitz more if I have better corners. That's guaranteed. I can play man coverage if I can lock up with their guys and not be too concerned about getting beat deep. Yeah, I can send seven guys. You know what I'm saying? I can send more than they're blocking because that's what a blitz is anyway. As long as you send more guys that they have blocking, that's considered a blitz. So I feel like, Jeff Ulbrich, yeah, it's a mid hire, as the young folks say. But man, if they don't bring no talent in and get younger in that interior defensive line and get some guys out there that can actually take those guys' spots or take some snaps away from Grady and Dave Onyemata, it didn't matter. It wasn't going to matter who they brought in.
I agree 100% with that, Jarvis. And I think that's ultimately why the Jeff Ulbrich hire doesn't necessarily move the needle for me, because I look at his success in New York, right? And much is made about how much of the Jets' defensive success was Robert Saleh versus Jeff Ulbrich. That doesn't really matter all that much to me, because when I look at it, and I haven't gone through the film, but I've been looking at a lot of stats over the last week or so, looking at this Jets defense, and we saw that defense basically be the worst defense in the NFL in 2021. And they were one of the best defenses in the NFL in 22 and 23. And then they fell back a bit in 24. And again, a big part of the questions about why, and did they fall back in 24 is related to Saleh versus Ulbrich. But ultimately, to me, I look at it just from the stats and on paper, they fell back in 24 because they didn't have the same level of talent in 24 as they had in 22 and 23.
Sure.
That defense, whether you want to say it's the Robert Saleh defense or Jeff Ulbrich defense, was predicated, their success in 22 and 23 was predicated on their ability to get pressure with four guys, right?
Sure.
They were dead last in the NFL in those 2 seasons in bringing 5 or more guys in that, and they still yet were like top 5 in sacks, top 10 in pressure and whatnot. And you have those 4 guys getting pressure. You have their ability for them to stop the run with soft boxes, right? With light boxes and whatnot, playing nickel and all that stuff in today's modern NFL. And then you had 2 really good cornerbacks on the back end. Sauce Gardner, arguably the best cornerback in the NFL for his first 2 years in the NFL. DJ Reed, probably the best number 2 corner in the NFL. And that combination made for a very effective defense. This past year, they fell back. They still got a lot of sacks. They still got a healthy amount of pressure this year. They're still in the upper ends of the league. But the thing that changed, they couldn't rely on getting with 4. They finished 13th in the NFL this year, bringing 5 or more. So their style of defense of we can just rush 4 and drop 7 into coverage and have our guys cover on the back end. Sauce had some injuries. DJ Reed had some injuries. They lost CJ Mosley, their middle linebacker. That was a big part of their run defense. They couldn't stop the run anymore, right? They swap out. They lose Jermaine Johnson to an injury. They trade John Franklin Myers, right? And so now all of a sudden, that conversation of like, okay, Jeff Ulbrich's coming here to Atlanta, and what is he bringing to the table? It's like, well, even though the Jets took a step back from where they were from a talent standpoint the 2 previous years, I still think that Jets defense is probably still more talented than what the Falcons currently have. And if your defense is based off of we need this level of talent, and then if we go to this level of talent, which is what the Jets were in 2024, and I know this is an audio medium and the people that are listening don't really know what I'm saying, but there's a drop off from where you were at the top of the league to what you were last year. And you saw a big drop off in the performance of that defense. And then you have the Falcons even lower at that level. And it's like, you have to bring your defense from talent up to the level of the 2024 Jets. And still, like, that's not going to make that much of a difference because your scheme is predicated. So basically all that to sit here and say, going to what you're saying, Jarvis, the Falcons need more talent, but they like if Jeff Ulbrich's scheme is going to be the saving grace of this football team, like the level of talent that they have to go to from where they are today to be a successful defense is so astronomical. It's like they have to basically get a Myles Garrett type of player to get to where the Jets were previously. And so I'm saying all that to basically say that's why like hiring Jeff Ulbrich is like, okay, like, what is it that you do here? Like, I don't know what you're doing because it's really all about the guys up front.
And that's the thing, man. That's why I feel like, we talked about this on Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Atlanta Football Party. Like, I feel like that's why this offseason for Terry Fontenot is so crucial because of that type of pressure, that level of pressure. Like, okay, if you're not bringing this amazing scheme where we know exactly what you like to do as a DC because you've had this long history of good to great defenses as a play caller in the NFL. And I'm not talking about Jeff Ulbrich, right? I mean, he's been fine. He's been a fine defensive coordinator with talent. I feel like that puts a lot of pressure on Terry Fontenot, and I feel like I don't know. And to be honest with you, if you ask me, do I feel like he'll be able to come out shining like a diamond through that pressure? I don't know. And I'm more so leaning towards no versus yeah, he probably can. And that's that's a real sticky situation to be in as a general manager, like you laid out on the football party. A guy who hadn't had a winning season since he took over as a GM.
Yeah. So we'll see if the Falcons can add that defensive front, but it's just one of those things where, like, the alternative options, at least you could say, okay, this is the scheme that he's bringing. Steve Wilkes, he's going to blitz. Wink Martindale, he's going to blitz. Lou Anarumo, he's going to adjust his coverages to deal with that. If you had gone out and gotten Dennis Allen and interviewed him, Dennis Allen is like, we're going to play press man coverage and we're going to lock up your guys. And so there's just that sort of identity that you can hang your hat on. And to me, the Jets' identity, to me, from a defensive scheme standpoint, is like they're basically a souped up version of the Dan Quinn defense. That being said, those Dan Quinn defenses were a 4-3 scheme. The Jeff Ulbrich defenses in New York were a 4-3 scheme, but the Falcons were pretty adamant being more of a 3-4 team with Raheem Morris's arrival. And so, Jarvis, I have the question for you. Do you expect a scheme change, switch back to a 4-3? And do you think the team will benefit that? And we'll talk about that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Guys, it is playoff time, and if you're like me, you're looking to make the most out of these final weeks of football action, and that's where PrizePicks comes in. And if you want a chance to win real money while you're watching the games, PrizePicks is there for you. PrizePicks is simple. Just pick more or less on their player stat projections. You can just pick as little as 2 and, as many as you want, and you have a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings, it's clear why everybody's loving this platform. And, I've been putting my PrizePicks monies in, James Cook, been riding that all playoff long, Josh Allen, oh boy, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce's going to come through in January. All right. I that is clear to me every single year. So if you want to get in on that action and win some real money, all you got to do is download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, use that code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. You don't even have to win. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, so here with Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta, and we're talking about potential scheme changes, right? The switch to the 3-4, the 4-3, stay with that, hybrid schemes, all that stuff that is, used to be a big deal like 10, 15 years ago, but nowadays, like, everybody's running basically hybrid stuff. But Jarvis, I'll give my piece before I give you the floor talking about the potential scheme change. I kind of hope that the Falcons don't switch to a 4-3 now that Jeff Ulbrich is here, just because when I look at like the pieces on this defensive front that I like, that I sit here and I go, like, that guy has a chance to be here for more than a year or two. Players like Zach Harrison, player like Ruka Roro, players like Arnold Ebiketie, I kind of like them more as 3-4 players than I like them as 4-3 players. I think if the Falcons switched to a 4-3 scheme and played the 4-3 under front that is already kind of a hybrid, like, it's not going to be like, oh my God, they ruined the defense or anything like that. But it is one of those things where I just feel like you started this pass on a 3-4 Raheem Morris, and to just basically like, oh, we hired Jeff Ulbrich, so let's do what Jeff Ulbrich wants to do. I'm just like, all right, like, yes, that face that Jarvis is making right now, for those of you who are not YouTube, is basically the face. I'm like, why are we doing that? So Jarvis, I say my piece on
Raise my eyebrow, baby.
Changing the defensive front. What are your thoughts on the potential possibility of the Falcons changing their defensive front now that they've hired Jeff Ulbrich?
I look at the linebacker core. You got Nate Landman going into free agency. You got, you got 55. I don't know why his name is escaping me. What is wrong with me? Caden Ellis, yeah, that guy, the guy who was probably the most consistent pass rusher that on his team. So you have him going to, being your middle linebacker stalwart, right? And then you gonna count on Troy Anderson to be there? Like, you could barely get Landman and Anderson if you wanted those guys on the field at the same time. Just from a health standpoint, like, you couldn't do that consistently, right? So for me, if you're going to, and those three linebackers are so important when you're talking about running that base. Albeit you don't run it as much with you being in that nickel most of the time, majority of the time, with the way these offenses are being run in today's league. But if that is, which really makes me think that, okay, you have your linebacker core isn't really that dependable, right? Like, you have to get better in that spot. So why would you then switch to a scheme that is going to supposed to highlight those guys who'll be able to run and hit on early downs, and then maybe you go to that nickel when you have two guys that can run and cover, on third and long, what have you. So I feel like a scheme change going to depending on four guys in those early downs to kind of play the run and be able to get off and rush the passer. Man, shoot, man, I don't. I like 3-4 because it gives you options, right? You have guys who are tweeners that I feel I like the development on educated, even though it's been like molasses, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
and moving a little slow. He's been a little slow, but you see him starting to come along. So I feel like going back to him being a primary rusher, so to speak, I feel like that'll be an interesting transition. Like, you got D'Angelo Malone, who's the outside linebacker. Those are only two guys you have on the contract. So I'll be very interested to see if they move to that 4-3. And I think I wouldn't really necessarily like it because of the linebacker position just being such a weak point, I feel. Going forward based off the guys you have on the roster and based off of guys the talent level.
Yeah. Yeah, it's to me because I think Zach Harrison's one of those players that could probably do both, right? We saw him
Yeah.
play outside in
Beefed
the
up a
fourth
little bit.
year.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. But you bulked him up this offseason. He's pushing 290. I feel like he was probably your most consistent 3-4 DN this year in terms of being a guy that wasn't getting moved off the ball against the run
Sure.
and whatnot.
Yeah.
We know that's something that Ruka Roro showed an ability to do that. That was not something that David Onyemata did particularly well. And I think part of that was because David Onyemata is more of that disrupting, penetrating type of guy than the sort of let me hold the point of attack and take on these double teams. We know Grady Jarrett's not necessarily that guy. And so I feel like your personnel is geared towards it's not to sit here and say like, oh man, you stick with the 3-4. This defense is guaranteed to be successful. No one is saying that.
No.
But it
No.
is one of those things where I do feel like, at least for the pieces that are currently here, that you're at least optimistic are going to be around for longer than that. Like, Grady Jarrett. Like, I don't expect David Onyemata to be back next year. I expect Grady Jarrett to be back, but it's a ticking clock on how long Grady Jarrett is going to play. And basically, if Grady Jarrett says, I'm done in Atlanta, he pulls a Julio and it's like, I want to win, boss. Then I'd be like, hey, Grady, man, we love
That'd be so typical. Wouldn't that be typical? That'd just be so typical.
He sounded like somebody who wants to still be here at the end of the year. So I'm optimistic, but it is one of those things like Grady has done all that he possibly could be asked to do. And so if he wants out, then it's like, hey, man, like I'm not gonna hold this man hostage.
I don't blame you, bro. Do your thing.
I wish you the best. I really
Sure.
do. But we'll see what the Falcons do. I think they'll stick with the 3-4, but I always set my expectations low for this football team.
Don't be surprised if they shift to a 4-3.
Yeah, that's what we'll see. So, Jarvis, that being said, let's talk a little bit more about adding some more pieces to this defense, as well as maybe get into some of the things that you're looking forward to next week in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, and we'll do that to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So everybody wants to start the new year strong, and the one way that you can have more fun in 2025 than you had in 2024 is by going to more live events, whether it's sports, comedy, music, theater, whatever event is near you. Gametime is making it easier to get tickets thanks to their new feature, Gametime Picks, that's going to filter out the fluff and only show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Gametime is offering great seats at unbeatable prices. What you see is what you get, because if you toggle the all-in pricing on in the app, you don't have to worry about hidden fees at checkout. And we love the panoramic seat view, so you can line up that perfect spot at whatever your event is. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. And growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you hire. And LinkedIn, that's what they're going to come in, because they're going to give you the intel that you need, right, to identify the right candidates. They give you great data and all those sorts of things. So you're not stuck sitting there being like, I guess we'll bring back Jeff Ulbrich or whatever. No, LinkedIn is going to help you out. They're going to find the right person for you. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn is helping them find high quality candidates, the right high quality candidates. Could you imagine if the Jeff Ulbrich hire got a 72% approval rating from Falcon fans, right? All the Falcons had to do is just go to LinkedIn. That's how easy it is. So you can go to LinkedIn and have access to all those insights to help you find the right candidates, hire smarter this year, and find your next great hire over at LinkedIn by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So wrapping up today's Locked On Falcons here with Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta. You already pushing this. I've been preaching this. We've talked about this before, sort of priority, get that pass rush going, upgrade that linebacker core. But Jarvis, I want to pick your brain on the secondary, right? Okay. Where you have 5 pieces in the secondary, 3 corners, 2 safeties. As you say, you're going to be a nickel 60, 70% of the time. Those guys are going to be on the field a lot. You have 2 of those 5 pieces that you feel really good about. AJ Terrell, Jesse Bates. The other 3, Justin Simmons a free agent. Richie Grant's a free agent. Yeah. DeMarco Hellams is coming off an injury. He's coming back. Went through Micah Abernathy in there, special teams, whatever. They're really moving the needle at safety. Cornerback, D. Alford, I think, is a restricted free agent. Mike Hughes is an unrestricted free agent. Antonio Hamilton, Kevin King, unrestricted free agent. Clark Phillips is under contract. You got Natron Brooks or whatever. But I look at the secondary.
All-American.
Yeah, you look at this secondary, and it's like, this secondary needs a lot of work, especially if they let some of these guys walk in free agency, like potentially 3 new starters in the back end that you are going to need some help at. So I'm curious for you, and I think I probably can guess what your answer is, but where do you feel like the priority is when you're trying to attack those potential vacancies this offseason?
To be honest with you, man, I really feel like it's time to get us a guy to solidify that corner position opposite of AJ Terrell, because we've been spinning the wheel on this thing for how long now? Ever since they brought the man in, it's just been who they got out there for the low at the corner spot. What veteran can we bring in to try to just fill the spot, right? We know he's gonna be there. We don't know if he's gonna be there, but we know he's gonna be there. And that's just what it feels like it's been, ever since AJ Terrell has come in, when he was brought in that draft. So for me, I feel like the corner has to be priority in that secondary. And when you have a guy like Jesse Bates, you can afford to kind of see what you got at that strong safety spot. I would love to get somebody in there with some potential. I like what DeMarco Hellams brings to the table, but I think he's a little bit more of an old school safety, just far as like bringing that hat. Like, those days are over with, Jack. So for me, I will have to prioritize that opposite corner, because we've seen what it looks like when teams just say, we ain't throwing at 24. We just going to go opposite, and then we're going to attack the nickel. You know what I'm saying? Like, people, up in arms about D. Alford getting targeted so much. Like, yeah, he's going to get targeted a lot because a lot of teams are putting their doggone best wide receiver in the slot. and that's what it is. Now, thankfully, the Falcons figured out that AJ Terrell can follow guys. You know what I'm saying? You can implement that in the scheme. You know what I'm saying? Unless you're like going against the Dolphins or somebody, and they Mike McDaniel throwing doggone guys in half doggone motions and throwing them around and doing backflips and high behind the offensive line. You know what I'm saying? Before the play, you can do that. You can do those things because you have a guy of AJ Terrell's caliber to follow like this. So for me, I feel like corner has to be that spot that you have to get somebody that's young, has a pretty high ceiling, and somebody that you can throw in there and just lock in. Because to be honest with you, they probably thought Clark Phillips was going to be that guy, but I don't see him as a number 2 corner. I see him as a dime guy that's solid, you can put in, and a guy who can come in for your number 2 guy if he goes down.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's the position I figured you would go with because it makes sense, right? You're talking about it's been a revolving door every year. They have a new, different guy. Probably a high probability they'll have a different guy next year, but hopefully, hey, 2026 we'll have the same guy from 2025. Maybe we'll see. But I think you're right. Like it does feel like when you look at guys like Clark Phillips and DeMarco Helms, I see those guys as more role players, not starters, right?
Yeah.
I like DeMarco Helms as a third safety. I don't know quite yet. He did solid work in 23 in the back half of the season, playing more of a starter's role, but I think you can do better, right? Is basically where I'm at with that. And you mentioned Miami. Falcons get to play Miami this year in the Dome. So, I don't know if Tyreek Hill is going to be there because, there's ongoing trade rumors and all this stuff at this point in time. But
Or him just saying, man, I'm out. Man.
Yeah, but that type of speed in the Dome, it's going to be a problem. You also have to deal with Minnesota again. You get a rematch against Minnesota. And we saw what they did to the secondary the previous time. And so, can you run it back with the same 5, knowing what the Vikings did to you? If you make the playoffs, right, you're probably going to have to deal with a team like the Eagles, right? You dodged that AJ Brown bullet, right? We love AJ Terrell here on the Locked On Falcons podcast and Locked On Sports Atlanta, but we know that ain't the matchup for AJ Terrell. You want to get somebody who can deal with AJ Brown's physicality a little bit better than what AJ Terrell historically does. Like Terry McLaurin, okay, AJ, that's you. I got you. You got that locked down. I feel good about you going up against Puka Nacua next year. Marvin Harrison, that may not be necessarily the matchup that I like AJ Terrell. So finding, that's going to be a challenge, Jarvis. Finding players that can deal with the speed that we're going to see next year, deal with the size that the Falcons are going to see next year. You're going to need a lot of new, I think, a complete revamp of that secondary, in addition to what we're already talking about with, hey, the Falcons can't stand pat in that front 7 because they just do not have enough horses up front and enough speed and athleticism at the linebacker position at this point in time. And so, you just look ahead and you just go man, they got a lot of work to do. And so going back to what you said with Terry Fontenot, this is a key critical off season that they have to get out there and, Jarvis, I don't want to be that guy, but
yes, let's be it. Let's do it.
My biggest worry about the Falcons is they're just going to be we just need a couple of pieces. And then it's we finished 8-9 and, we got rid of Jimmy Lake. That was the problem, right? And then we just needed a couple of pieces for Jeff Ulbrich. And it's just my guy,
free.
You need a lot of pieces.
Let me stop you right there. I'll say it. You know what I'm saying? I don't care what people think. You know what I'm saying? Most of the time. Sometimes I care. I read your comments. I see y'all. I see y'all mother blankets. I'm gonna start responding a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Y'all better be glad I'm being nice and I'm trying to get my life right. You know what I'm saying? Lord, focus on the Lord in 2025.
Okay.
Anyway, when you look at, we just laid out the holes that they have, right? We said the linebacker core needs to get younger. It needs to get more athletic, right? And then we just laid out the corner opposite AJ Terrell needs to get a young guy in there with a higher ceiling. We just laid out the safety. There's a guy that's there, but we looked at him and said, DeMarco Helms, I don't know if you're a starter. I like what you bring to the table, but I don't know if that's necessarily a fit in today's game. So that's potentially 3, maybe 4 starting spots that you have holes in. So when we talk about the money, where the money coming from? Because they're negative 7 million in the salary cap, negative 7
I've
million,
seen
8
that. Yeah,
million, 7, 8 million, between 7 and 8 million, as far as in the whole. And you have to get above that number, in a couple months. It's gonna be here before you know it. So for me, man, it's just like, dog, like if you sitting up here saying, oh yeah, all we need is a couple spots, bruh, what you been looking at? That's what I don't understand. Like, no, it ain't that sweet, bro. You gotta get your issue because, like I said, this is gonna be it's crucial, man. I will continue to say it. This is gonna be crucial. We're gonna really see how well you evaluate talent from a free agency standpoint, from a draft standpoint, and I pretty much kind of already got my opinion about that already. Um, and like, I hope your capologist man is the highest paid dude that you can pay him because you got to figure out some stuff. And you know he come from New Orleans and all that stuff, cap hell and all that stuff. They figure out a way to get down. But man, this year, I don't know. I don't know, man. So yeah, I hope you're not resting on your laurels, Terry.
yeah.
I know you're
That's all
listening.
I'm saying. Like the way that they have treated it, they have been basically anti-New Orleans, right? Basically, like we will spend the minimum amount of money that we can because we want to kick the, we don't want to kick the can down the road
Want to
from a
be
cap.
well for the future.
Yeah, and it's just like, Terry, I'm just going to say that I don't think you might be around for the future if you don't get it right this offseason. So that's what I'll say. Jarvis, quickly, we'll be going to the Senior Bowl down in Mobile next week. I know you'll be focusing on those pass rushers, but are there any particular players that you're excited to see, understanding that we'll probably get some dropouts? Because I looked at the accepted invites list today. It's like 160 names, and I'm like, I think there was like 130 people last year. So it feels like a good chunk of these guys, I get it. Senior Bowl, just like send out all the invites if you accept it, and then we'll figure it out later. But a couple of these names might not show up next week, so we'll see. But any sort of specific names that you're intrigued to see?
Mike Green. Interested to see about him. I've been hearing a lot of buzz. I got to see it for
Marshall.
myself, guys. I'm always from Marshall. Also Jared Ivey. He's a guy that I called a game for when he was in high school. I feel old as crap now. He was at Georgia Tech, then transferred to Ole Miss, and gave Georgia all they could handle. Mr. Princely. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to even try to butcher his last name. I'm working on it.
He destroyed Georgia.
He gave Georgia.
I just rewatched that game this week, and I was like, "Good God!"
Yes,
Good God.
yes, bro. Yes, yes. If Princely is available, you know what I'm saying, at that 15 spot, I wouldn't mind at all. Because there's some big mofos that he was whooping in them down there in Athens. So I feel on the road and down in the Ole Miss. So those are a few guys that I got my eyes on. So you know me, man, I'm always gonna be trench heavy. And yeah, make sure you guys check out Locked On Sports. Then I'll be dropping some bonus content, man. You know what I'm saying? Little observations type situation. So make sure you guys check that out.
Yeah, check it out. We'll be doing coverage here on Locked On Falcons. Last year we talked about, hey, Michael Penix, the best quarterback down in Mobile on Locked On Falcons, and didn't think much of it at the time, but it was just like, hey, it's something. And then
Terry listened.
He lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, a couple months later, Michael Penix, welcome to Atlanta. So,
Yes.
We might be having similar conversations about a lot of these pass rushers that will be down there. A couple of guys that are getting first round buzz. Those are the guys I'm kind of referring to that I'm not sure if they're going to stick around, and basically they're like, no, I don't really need this. I saw Mel Kiper's mock. I'm already in the first round. I'm good. But hopefully we'll get some of those guys and see what they can do. Mike Green, especially, I'm really looking forward to. I hope he really does go there, because seeing him whoop up on the Sun Belt Conference, I want to see what you can do against SEC offensive linemen. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So that is in store for you next week, guys. Really appreciate you hanging out with us and Jarvis Davis here at Locked On Sports Atlanta. Of course, we'll have a weekend show. We'll talk all about the offensive line and Drew Dahlman, and should the Falcons bring him back, and Caleb McGarry, can he protect Michael Penix's blind side? So that's all in store for you tomorrow on Locked On Falcons. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL and get the scoop on the upcoming weekend's playoff action, as well as all the ongoing coaching searches and all the stuff going around the NFL. Again, I don't know. I'm covering the Falcons. But if you want to know, check out Locked On NFL. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.